Today, our AI tools are doing all the work, but in most cases, they have no idea who we are. They don't know your Salesforce org, they don't know your metadata, your release pipeline, or your compliance requirements. All they do is they generate code, test ideas, but in vacuum. And when something breaks in production, there is no audit trail, no governance, and actually no one in control. That gap between AI capability and enterprise reality is exactly what Copado is closing with Agentia. And today we have with us Jill Adams, VP of AI Product and Experience at Copado, to walk us through that. First of all, Jill, it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Before we talk about Agentia, I would love to know a bit about the company. Talk a bit about the company, and of course, you folks predate the whole AI. I mean, AI has been around for ages. We have been talking about Terminators, but they're not here yet. But the interest in AI rekindled after the whole ChatGPT, OpenAI, then MCP. So talk a bit about Copado, and then we'll talk about from AI context, and then we'll talk about Agentia.
Sure. So just a little background on Copado. Copado has been a Salesforce-native DevOps solution going back 13 years. And so that is really, our foundation, right, is that we have proven scale and governance, right, across the largest enterprises that use Salesforce, complex environments, complex compliance requirements, right, complex governance needs. So that's really our foundation. And over the last few years, what we have noticed is that AI is becoming more an imperative, right? Obviously, with the introduction of AI native development tools. And so what we've noticed is there's actually a gap today, right, between being able to leverage those tools and having safe and governed releases and bringing those agents into production. There's a gap there. Right. So what our goal is from Copado is to bridge that gap and be the bridge from DevOps to what we're calling AgentOps.
Excellent. Thank you. And since you did mention DevOps, and DevOps is or kind of was the gold standards, pipelines, automation, collaboration, everything works just like clockwork. But AI agents are now showing up inside those workflows, generating codes, running tests, actually deleting a lot of codes. I was reading a story this morning as well. Now, of course, they're also helping solving problem, diagnosing failures. People have been talking about vibe hunting these days. Talk a bit about, you touched upon it briefly, what does that shift actually look like on the ground, and why does it break the traditional DevOps model?
It's a great question. And our point of view is that really how it breaks a traditional model is that there's no longer that governance, right? There's the auditability, the traceability, the compliance gates, the quality gates, right? All of those were put in place to make sure, right, to your point, that in a traditional DevOps workflow, that workflow is operationalized, right? Especially for large regulated industries, government organizations, that is just a non-negotiable, right, for quality and trust. And so what we have seen is that with the introduction of especially vibe coding tools, for example, that, 10x, 100x the productivity of developers, all of a sudden we're getting more code, but that creates more risk, right? Because more code is being introduced, more merge conflicts, right? And so the weight of that code and the weight of the changes is now almost too much for individual people to actually be managing that process on their own, right? And that's why we firmly believe that if you're going to be introducing vibe coding, if you're going to be using agents in your development process, you also need agents as part of your DevOps process. And that's what we're calling AgentOps, right? And that's going to help remove that bottleneck of the human being the bottleneck in that process.
There is so much to unpack there. I'll start with looking at memory AgentOps. You use the term, and it's a meaningful kind of distinction. what exactly does agent ops mean here, and why is the traditional DevOps mindset not sufficient, or if it is still sufficient, how is it evolving? Was AI agents become active participants in the delivery life cycle?
Yeah. So first, let's unpack the term, right? Agent ops. What does that mean? To us, it really means agent lifecycle management and being able to manage agents the same way that you would manage code, right? But that is a adoption journey that we know people are going to have to go on with us. And so some of the ways that we think of that adoption journey is first, we need to make sure that organizations are ready for agents in production. And that requires some very foundational DevOps foundations, right? Like code coverage, making sure they have mature testing practices, for example, right? Making sure they do have a governed pipeline, right? That they can bring things to and from, sandbox to production. And so really to us, DevOps starts with making sure that those agents are now in the actual workflow, in the workflow of that pipeline, so that from planning, testing, releasing, monitoring, improving, right, continuous improving, agents are there helping you each step of the way, and they're managing the life cycle of agents through that pipeline.
Now let's bring Agentia in the picture. Of course, as you also mentioned, if you look at the whole Salesforce ecosystem, I think they even find a new term, agent force or something like that, and there was a lot of confusion that the whole rebranding. But if you look at that ecosystem, there is no shortage of AI tooling in Salesforce ecosystem right now. What makes Agentia fundamentally different from everything else that teams are already seeing in that ecosystem and in the market?
Yeah, and I think for us, like we view the tools that Salesforce has provided not as a competition, right, but as a really is a good collaboration, right? Because where we see the difference with Copado is we're now the layer that is bringing safe changes, right, to that production org, right? And you can think of a system like Agentforce where you're going to have all of these agents doing simultaneous things all at the same time, right? It's kind of that agent sprawl mentality. And so you still need that governance, you still need that safety, you still need that trust, right? And so that's really what Copado aims to provide is the governance, the trust, the quality gates, the auditability, right? So that you can adopt agents in production with the governance and guardrails that a lot of enterprises require. And we think that's going to be just table stakes in the future as more and more agents get into production.
And also, that's also critical for a lot of regulatory industry, the compliance, they have to work in that space. And also if you look at Europe, of course, that the whole compliant industry, and there's a lot of push also in terms of sovereign AI and everything else. And if you don't even have that kind of governance, it will not work. Now let's talk about one thing. When I was reading about Agentia is the context hub, because the fact is AI models are great, your data may be great or not. The thing is, data is great, models are great, but in the between, what you tell, that's where, sometimes AI start behaving like a toddler. So context does play a big role. Talk a bit about Context Hub, because most AI tools just guess based on general training data. How does Context Hub actually ground your agents in a customer's specific Salesforce environment, their metadata, their pipeline, their policies, especially when it comes to compliance and regulatory requirements, so that they can act safely rather just intelligently? Also, there is hallucination will be there, but less hallucination. And also your teams are also kind of a bit content that just the right context is there.
100%. We really feel like the Context Hub is one of our main differentiators, right, that we're bringing into the space. And so, as you mentioned, right, with a generic AI developer tooling, it is trained on the vast knowledge of the internet, the vast knowledge in the industry. It is not trained on your specific org, right, your specific environment setup, your specific metadata, your flows, your object model, like all of those things, like the generic AI coding tools are not trained on that, right? So by bringing in that context and using that to ground all of our agents, it produces not just better results, right, from less hallucinations and more accurate results, but it also makes sure that whatever it is coding is validated, right, in your org, right, and is able to be deployed safely. So it's a whole new level, a whole next level, I would say, of personalization to your unique organization needs. And it's not just your org. It's also your Jira instance, your individual like user stories, your deployment history, right? There's so much knowledge that we're bringing into the Context Hub, your Confluence articles, right? Your best practice docs. So if you want your entire developer community to be coding in a certain way, you can enforce those policies, right, via our Context Hub and really level the playing field and up everyone's game, right? So what would be maybe like a junior developer, right, is now coding at a capacity of a more senior developer, right, with less hallucinations, less errors, and obviously that results in a lot more speed for the organization.
If you look at, of course, AI brings a lot of speed, but there's a bigger shift in how humans work. When agents are handling coding, testing, and documentation, the developers' jobs also change. How is Agentia making teams more efficient when it comes to manual execution towards something like, of course, strategic oversight? And what does that look like day to day? Because we are not just looking at assistants, we are also letting agents make a lot of decisions.
Correct. And I think it's one of our principles, right, that we firmly believe that there has to be a human review. There has to be a human in the loop, right, for critical processes like deploying into production or things of that nature. So one of our kind of guiding principles, right, is that agents can do the work, but there always needs to be a human accountable, right, at the end of the day. And so that's part of what makes Agentia unique, is that we're able to build in those approval steps, build in those quality gates, right into the workflow, so that your development teams can stay in control, right, not lose control of what gets eventually pushed into production, but also, benefit from that acceleration. And so we're seeing a lot of great results from customers where, the agent got everything maybe like 85% right, and it's getting better all the time, right? The accuracy, but we still need that human to be accountable, right, and in control. And to be frank, it's not just the code quality. It's also, let's make sure that there's governance around token usage. Let's make sure there's governance around, right, policies and things of that nature that are not just code related, right? They're best practices for your company. Their governance on, how many tokens or how many tokens a specific developer is using, right, on a specific project. So it really runs the gamut from a compliance and a governance standpoint.
Eventually, or it's already enterprise teams, they are going to ask hard governance questions. When an AI agent makes a decision inside a production delivery workflow, how do you maintain an audit trail? And as you said, human is responsible and accountable, but who actually will be accountable when the teams are using it?
Yeah, and I want to go back to our DevOps foundation, right? Because that is really the scaffolding on which our entire Agentia platform is built. And the scaffolding, that historical foundation of DevOps where, everything does have an audit trail, right? Quality gates are built in, right? That's the same scaffolding that we're enabling our agents now to operate within. So that's really where, like, we're not reinventing the wheel here. That's why we think we have a right to win in this space, right? Because we do have the proof, right, that we can do this not just for, small companies, but for the largest, most complex enterprises in the Salesforce ecosystem.
I mean, of course, Agentia, you folks launched recently. Where does it go from here? You have called this as a kind of foundation for fully autonomous delivery? What does that maturity curve look like for teams adopting it today? What does this evolution look like for you, for the whole Salesforce ecosystem?
Yeah, and I think like the adoption, right? The adoption curve for any sort of transformation follows a very similar model, right? And so one thing that we're very cognizant of is how do we bring our customers on that adoption journey with us, right? Because everyone is going through their own adoption curve, right? On how do they leverage AI? How do they transform into an AI native company? That's now the imperative, right, out there for companies. And so really what we're doing even from a roadmap and how we think about the future of Agentia is first we have to enable teams to get ready for agents, right? And so they really need that foundational DevOps foundational work just to get ready for agents, right? Agents will traverse your system. They will look into all the nooks and crannies of your metadata, and they will find things, right, that are maybe duplicative or inconsistent, right? And so there's kind of this cleanup, right, or get ready for agents phase, right, that people need to start with. And that's really where the DevOps foundations come in. Next, we know that customers are going to want to be able to ship agents safely into production with governance and guardrails. And that's across the entire life cycle. So from planning, building, testing, releasing, operating, monitoring, and continuously improving, right? And so that's really going to be our focus, right, over the next few months is getting to a place where our customers are really confident that they can ship, right, with the right amount of agent QA, with the right amount of testing, not just, the functionality, but also the behavior, right? Because these are different systems, right? Now they're systems of behavior and intelligence, and they're non-deterministic, right? So testing is a whole different muscle, right, with AI. So that's really what we're doubling down on in the next near term. And then in the future, we really see this future of continuous optimization, self-healing even, right, in the future of these systems, where we can enable teams to really supercharge their own DevOps teams, right? We don't feel like this is a replacement for people. We feel like this is something that will supercharge them, right, and keep them in control. And so that's really our North Star, right, to get to that point where then customers can continuously monitor and improve agents in production without enormous burden on their existing teams.
Jill, thank you so much for joining us and sharing the thinking behind Agentia. This is genuinely important moment for the whole Salesforce ecosystem, and it's clear that Copado is building something that takes both the opportunity and the responsibility seriously. And however way the DevOps ecosystem is evolving, teams can stay updated. And for those who are watching, you should definitely check out Copado and explore what Agentia can do for your delivery team. And once again, Jill, thank you, and I look forward to the next conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me.